Madam Speaker, I rise this afternoon in strong support of this bill. While I'm new to this legislative body over the last 3 years, understand from colleagues of mine and from talking to those representatives from many groups such as the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, that this bill has been a long time coming, that there has been quite a bit of time and effort put into the negotiations of this bill to truly make it affordable to municipalities across the state of Connecticut. Before I make any more comments on the bill, I just have a question to the proponent through you.
Please proceed, sir.
Through you to the proponent of the bill, how has the scope of a qualifying event been defined in this bill? Through you.
Representative Connolly.
Through you, Madam Speaker, the scope of qualifying event has been defined very limitedly to a listing of events that a police officer, firefighter, or parole officer may witness, which includes death of others, mayhem of others, and some serious trauma that they may have witnessed in the course of their employment. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Polletta.
And through you, Madam Speaker, could the good proponent just list those? Thank you.
Representative Connolly.
Through you, Madam Speaker, those start on line 85 of Senate Amendment B, and that would be witnessing a deceased minor, witnessing the death of a person or an incident involving a death of a person, witness of an injury of a person who subsequently dies before admission to the hospital, physical contact and threats of an injured person who subsequently dies before admission in the hospital. Bear with me. Carries an injured person who subsequently dies before admission to the hospital, witnesses the traumatic physical injury that results in the loss of a vital body part or a vital body function. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Polletta.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the good proponent for her explanations of these qualifying events. So it brings me to my next point. We obviously sat through some public hearing testimony on this bill, and again, as I alluded to before, it's been a while, and there's been multiple negotiations on this bill, because I think that what the good proponent just said was what was in so much dispute over these last several years, is that, you know, what really qualifies as an event under this bill. And that's what was giving some pause to municipalities across the state of Connecticut. But now, with this narrowed scope, I can stand here and say that I support what was written and what was ultimately agreed upon and brought before this body. So, you know, we all have our first responders in our districts. Everyone goes back home and speaks to police and fire personnel, and oftentimes there are horrendous stories that we, you know, generally don't hear of unless we have some sort of intimate relationship with someone that's on, let's say, a police force. Well, I have that specific I don't want to call it a privilege, but I am very close to an individual who spent 37 years on the Watertown Police Force, many of which were spent as a head of the Detective Bureau. So when I spoke with him about this bill, boy, did he have a lot to tell me about what he encountered over his many years as not only a police officer, but the head of the Detective Bureau of the Watertown Police Department. Horrific and heart-wrenching stories, talking about a child dying in his arms when he was doing CPR, talking about a person that he knew on a very intimate basis that happened to have a heart attack, and he was the first one to arrive at the house, and his children watched as he tried to give this individual CPR, and ultimately he died. And it brings me to another point. The L'Ambiance Plaza disaster in Bridgeport. While it was before I was born, I'm fortunate enough to be a member of an Italian-American club in Waterbury that lost tens of workers in that horrific plaza collapse in Bridgeport. These were folks that left their families, went to work, hard-working men every day, in and out, concrete construction, bricklayers, you name it, provided for their families. And yet, when that building collapsed, I don't think And I certainly don't know, because again, I wasn't around, but I don't think anyone could put a pulse on what those first responders saw when they walked into a building when slab after slab after slab of concrete fell and crushed these individuals, many of which were related to many close friends of my parents and members of this organization in Waterbury. It was a horrific day. It's still commemorated to this day, but one can only imagine what these folks had to see heading into that collapse. I think it's fair to say with this bill, and my colleague, Representative Stradinsky, will outline a little bit more in just a moment, but I think it's fair to say that it isn't a perfect bill. I think it's fair to say that it's a work in progress, and it certainly is fitting to say that there were folks that wanted to be included in this bill that unfortunately were not. That's why I think we as a chamber have to make a promise to them that folks like EMTs that are oftentimes the first responders will be looked at and possibly brought into this piece of legislation next session, because they do the work that police and fire do just as well, if not better. So there is room for improvement here, but this is a good first step. This is a bipartisan first step, something that was signed on to by both leaders of both chambers, supported almost unanimously, to give these folks some sort of know that we are listening to them, that they are not just, casted off to the side, that after something like this happens that changes their life, they are not forgotten about. Because I could never do that line of work. I admit it. And I would venture to guess that many people in this chamber could not ever do that type of work. But for those brave men and women that head into burning buildings, that try to save a choking child, or someone that's having a heart attack, or someone that was in a bad accident or a bad fall, they deserve some sort of protection. And I think that this bill gives it to them. And one final point I'd like to make, I want to thank those prior to me that worked on this bill. The members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee, the members of the Public Safety Committee. I want to thank CCM, Mayor Neil O'Leary of Waterbury, who worked diligently on this and bringing it to us today. I hope it will be adopted, maybe unanimously today, and that we can get Governor Lamont to sign this bill to give these folks the protection that they need. Thank you.